People often ask me why I'm so interested in sustainable fashion and when it started. And although I can't pinpoint the exact moment in time, I am certain of when I performed my first act of sustainability. A lot of people don't know this, but a huge problem in the fashion industry is landfill accumulation. In recent years, brands have been able to provide incredibly inexpensive clothing. And because of this, consumers are more likely to buy this clothing, which means it ends up in the landfill faster. A simple way to combat this is to wear your clothing for a longer amount of time, and also to consider what you're purchasing and whether or not you really need it. So this is exactly what I did. All throughout elementary school, I wore the exact same article of clothing for about 3 to 4 days a week. I'm slightly ashamed to admit that it was a pair of cargo shorts, but I absolutely loved them. I think it was the pockets that really sold me. They were so deep and I could fit so many things in them. It was like Mary Poppins' purse, but in a pair of shorts. I remember distinctly, I was leaving for school one day, and my dad stopped me. He looked me right in the eyes and he said, "Sarah, you cannot leave the house in those." In that moment, I knew it was the end of the shorts. Now, obviously, I don't recommend that you wear your clothing to these extremes. But this story does play into a larger concept about fashion and its relationship to consumption. My expertise is in sustainable fashion, but I really don't think a conversation about eco-friendly clothing can happen until a larger problem is addressed. This issue is rooted in our innate desire to be accommodated at all costs. Unfortunately, this era of mass technology has been followed by an expectation of mass convenience. This idea is perpetuated by brands like Amazon, Uber, and Grubhub because they can provide incredibly inexpensive products and services in under 24 hours. At the surface, it seems like there's nothing wrong with this. Who wouldn't want to save money? Who wouldn't want to save time? But I fear that as we go further down this path, it will be so much harder to reverse. We've become accustomed to a very specific lifestyle of convenience. It's human nature to want one simple solution to one very large problem. But at the end of the day, using metal straws instead of plastic ones isn't enough. Taking reusable bags to the grocery store isn't enough. It only takes 2 seconds to repost a picture of saving sea turtles on Instagram. That's not enough. While these physical small things are good, and we should keep doing them, I think the real solution is a little bit more ambiguous. It's not tangible in nature, it's psychological. Given that the fashion industry is the second leading polluting industry, it really is a great place to start. But before I can even dive into clothing production and why it's so bad for the environment, I want to address the word sustainability. What does it even mean? It has such a distinct connotation from being used from all of these brands nowadays, but we don't all have the same definition. This is a problem. If brands want to reap the monetary benefit of using buzzwords like sustainable or eco-friendly, then their products should actually be inherently sustainable. There must be a universal standard that these companies abide by. It should be no different than labeling produce as being organic. Can you imagine going to the grocery store, getting a box of cereal, and not having nutrition facts on the back? That would be alarming. You would feel like the brand is lying to you. I really don't think clothing should be any different. When I get a shirt, I want to know where it came from and what impact it had on the environment. So that's why I've created a garment fact sheet. And I'm going to kind of use this to walk you through the life cycle of one polyester shirt. Now, polyester is very commonly used in the fashion industry, given that it's so inexpensive to produce. Polyester is essentially plastic. It can take up to 200 years for it to degrade into the environment fully. Then we have to consider the production process. Most typically when clothing's made, it's divided into 3 separate facilities. You have textile production, garment production, and then finishings, which includes lace, trims, things like that. So any impact that happens in that first factory, multiply that times 3. So we want to think about consumption. What is this factory using in terms of energy and fossil fuel? And then subsequently, what is it putting back into the atmosphere? Then we have to think about the materials itself. So for example, a cotton shirt, we have to think about the cotton that we gathered and then also how it was produced. Then finally, I want to consider transportation. How does this shirt get from point A to point B to point B, or to point C, to the store, to the hands of the consumers, and then eventually to the landfill? That's so much transportation. The ecological footprint of just one garment is absolutely astounding. So I have been designing clothing for a little while, and I decided to tackle what the fashion industry hasn't been doing in terms of sustainability. And it's especially hard to do this given a phenomenon called fast fashion. So slow fashion is luxury. It's expensive, it's slow, they come out with about 4 collections per year. Fast fashion can overturn products in as quickly as 2 weeks. They come out with thousands of items per year. So when I'm designing, I like to kind of consider what fast fashion is doing and how I can do the opposite. So one way I do this is I look at textile use. So the garment on the left was made using a fabric comprised of 50% recycled material, and then the garment in the middle was made of recycled cork. The second thing that I like to consider is garment construction. If you think about a shirt, it's three-dimensional in form, but it once started out as a flat piece of fabric. It's essentially all of these puzzle pieces that don't fit. That means they're scraps. More often than not, these scraps end up in the landfill. So when I'm creating clothing, I have to use a lot of math and strategizing to find the best way to mitigate scraps. And then finally, and this was actually a very recent discovery, natural dyes are far better than their alternative, which is synthetic dyes. And this was really hard for me to digest, because as a designer, I love color, I love vibrancy, I love print, and that's really hard to achieve with natural dyes. The issue with man-made dyes is that when they end up in water, they can be lethal to marine life. So I recently started experimenting with some natural dyes, and most typically when I'm designing clothing, I tackle one aspect of sustainability. But today I decided to combine multiple components into one dress. So if you see the flowers start to fade into a different color, this was partly achieved through dye use using cabbages and beets. Additionally, I've been collecting scraps for years, and I didn't really have a purpose for them until recently. I decided to cut them into flowers and then put them on a dress. If I can leave you with one final thought or one final message, it's that sustainability is not easy. And despite what brands might make you believe, it's not as simple as using metal straws. It's not as simple as buying one random organic cotton t-shirt. We must be comfortable with sacrifice. We have to be okay with sacrificing both time and money. We can only achieve true sustainability once we finally become comfortable being uncomfortable. Thank you.